these IEMs pose a big problem. Or is it a small one? For me, IEMs are my ticket to a premium audio experience when I'm out and about, and based on their reputation, the Sony IER-Z1R was going to give me just that ticket. These are a relatively expensive IEM that was originally priced at $1,700 US, but seems to be listed now consistently at about $1,598 US. For the money, you get two really good quality cables. You get one with a 3.5mm connector, the other with a 4.4mm balance connector. You also get a fantastic range of tips in different sizes and different sorts of materials. The IEMs themselves are solid, they're metal, they're beautifully built. And inside each of these, it's a three-way design. You've got a dynamic driver acting as a super tweeter. You've then got a balanced armature taking care of the rest of the upper registers. And finally, a dynamic driver taking care of the bass up into the mids. All of that combines to an impedance of 40 ohms and a sensitivity of 103 decibels per milliwatt, making these very easy to drive from anything. Of course, power quality is different from power quantity, so these will still want a high quality source, but the point is you can use them from a low powered high quality source like a great dongle. The IER-Z1R also uses the same technologies in the dynamic driver that were used in the excellent MDR-Z1R premium closed-back headphones from Sony, and that should make for a fantastic sound. The drivers have all been set up in a very specific way to ensure a straight path for the sound, no bends to curve around that can change things like resonance and have effects on timing. The super tweeter is a coaxial design, meaning that its directivity is shooting straight into your ear because high frequencies tend to be very, very directional. And they've also thought about things like making sure that the sound from each of the drivers will arrive at your ears at exactly the same time. As they should, this is a premium IEM. When you start thinking about the crossover that connects all these components together within the Z1R, even that's been designed meticulously, thinking about which capacitors are going to get used, because every capacitor lends a different sound to the crossover. And so they haven't designed this by just finding one based on specs. They've designed this by listening to a whole lot of different versions of the crossover to see which one sounds the best. Because you could have 20 different versions that all have the same specs, but nothing on that spec sheet is going to tell you how they sound in character. And that's what they've done to get the IER-Z1R sounding as best they think they can. The final thing to mention is that the IER-Z1R has an insanely ridiculous frequency range. This will play back sounds anywhere from 3 Hz all the way through to 100 kHz. That's sounds that only dogs and insects and some other animals can hear. We've got no hope. But there is some research coming up nowadays about the fact that some of those frequencies actually influence our perception of the lower frequencies. And I'll talk about that in a separate video dedicated just to that topic. And so on that note, if you want to know more about those sorts of things, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. And so what you're probably gathering at this point is that these are a lot of IEM for the money. You're getting these incredibly built housings, meticulous attention to detail in the design, amazing accessories, good quality accessories. Everything about them screams value for money based on a very high price tag. And so let's talk about the sound quality of the Z1Rs now to see if their sound performance matches up to the expectations they build in you with their design, their build quality, and their general presentation. And I mean their physical presentation. Putting the IER-Z1R into my ears and taking a listen. By the way, I didn't only listen at a cafe, that was a part of my testing, not all my testing. And so most of my listening was actually in a quiet environment. But the good news is that at a cafe, they did isolate the outside noise fairly well. What you then hear in your own little world is a wonderfully resolving sound. There's a sense of focus, transparency, and articulation to the sound from the Z1Rs that's instantly impressive. They deliver lots and lots of detail without being forceful with it, and the bass is punchy and solid and fast without being enhanced. The IER-Z1R is one of those IEMs where you can feel the music. And I don't just mean bass punch, I mean even mid-range content like a guitar. You can almost feel it coming through your ears as well as hearing it. And that's at moderate listening levels. I'm not someone that blasts my ears. This is all in the 75 to 85 dB range. You can hear the articulation and feel the articulation. And that to me makes the Z1R an addictive IEM. Coming back to that mid-range for a moment, it's clean, it's articulate, and most importantly from a tonality tonality point of view, it's quite natural. I say quite natural because who's to say what's right and wrong in a recording, but the IER-Z1R presents a sound that doesn't make you think that anything's off. The treble quality is also excellent, but the IER-Z1R, like many IEMs on the market, does get a bit spicy in the treble for me. Between 4 kHz and 6 kHz, it's just a little bit overdone for my ears and my tastes. Now, as always, we all hear differently because our ear canals are all different. I've got a link down below in all my IEM reviews where you can go through and watch a video where I explain why that is. So you might have heard these and think the treble's just perfect. It probably is for you because your ear canals are probably different from mine. But if you generally align with my taste in IEMs, you may find these just a little bit spicy in the treble. The good news is the quality of that treble is fantastic, and so it's not treble that I don't enjoy. I'm just conscious that it's a little bit spicier than my preference. Having said that, that's part of what contributes to their sense of articulation and clarity and transparency, and I think it might also help out a little bit with another thing they do extraordinarily well, and that's staging and imaging. These present a wonderfully focused, clean and clear soundstage that's expansive for an in-ear monitor. And so in short, the IER-Z1R sounds amazing. This is an IEM that, despite having a little bit more treble than I prefer, I don't want to take out of my ears. And that's kind of the problem. Because they want to take themselves out of my ears. You see, this is my ear, and this is the ear that the IER-Z1R seems to have been designed for. While I was listening to the IER-Z1R at a cafe recently, I had to keep reaching up and adjusting the IEM as it snuck its way out of my ears. It wasn't falling out, it was just pushing its way out a little bit, and there was no tip, no position, no adjustment that I could make to keep them securely in my ear. They're just too big, too heavy, and the shape for some reason isn't quite right. They're comfortable when they're in there, they just don't want to stay in there. In contrast, I had 2 other excellent IEMs with me, and both of those were supremely comfortable and I didn't need to touch them once after they were inserted. And so let's talk a little bit now about those other 2 IEMs and whether or not it's worth putting up with the need to adjust the IER-Z1R, because if they just flat out smash these other 2 in terms of sonic performance, then it's probably worth it. But that's a big question. And so let's start off talking about the HiFiMan Svanar IEMs. These come in at $1,999 US, making them more expensive than the Sonys. And going back and forth between these IEMs, listening to a bunch of tracks including What Did I Do to My Love, which was a fantastic recommendation for my upcoming Funk and Soul audiophile albums video, which is a little bit delayed because I'm trying to find a new fun way of presenting that one. Make sure you subscribe if you want to see it when it comes out. But going back and forth, the most obvious thing from the Svanars was how much more forward they are with their treble. Their point of emphasis drops further down into the 2 to 3 kHz range, and it makes the Svanar come across a little bit tinny, especially initially, but even after your brain adjusts, they do come across a little bit more aggressive in the treble and a touch more tinny from a tonal point of view. That starts to also influence the vocal range, and it makes vocals feel a bit more in your face and a bit more energetic, which some people are going to love. I'm not saying it's worse, it's just different from the Z1Rs. The bass quantity and quality is very similar from both of these, and that's to say they are both fantastic. One of the things I love most about the Svanars is the quality of their bass. These are another IEM in the Svanars that you can feel when they're playing music. Using narrow tips on the Svanars does help to tame their treble a bit, but the same can be said for the Sonys, so that doesn't really shift the balance here so much as just put them on a level playing field. And where these 2 IEMs really started to separate for me was that as I listened to a track like What Did I Do to My Love, the backing vocals through the IER-Z1R had a scale, a space around the main instrumentals and vocals that just transported me into the musical experience. The Svanars never completely got out of the way in the way that the Z1Rs can. The Z1Rs, you could say, are more transparent in the sense that you forget, from a musical point of view, you forget that you're wearing them. Unfortunately, from a physical point of view, that's not the case, and we'll come back to that. With the IER-Z1R, you're more likely to hear sounds just pop out of nowhere, and it's going to bring that excitement of hearing your tunes in a way that you've never heard them before, because each individual sound is just so present in space and so focused in space, but it's all still one coherent soundstage. These aren't playing tricks, they're just helping to expand the overall soundstage and let all the different sounds play within that space. On the other hand, the Svanars are excellent, but they just occasionally remind me of the fact that I'm listening to IEMs with that slightly more aggressive treble and the slightly more tinny treble from a tonality point of view. And so on sound quality alone, I would definitely choose the IER-Z1R. the Svanars are great, the Z1R is better. But if you put both of them in front of me and ask me to use one, it's got to be the Svanar I'm going to go for because I can put them in my ears and just enjoy them. I don't keep having to reach up and fix them, and that's breaking all of that wonderful immersion that the Z1Rs give me. There is no doubt in my mind the Z1R is the better sounding IEM of these two. It's probably technically stronger as well, but physically, ergonomically, it's just not quite up to the right level. And so in some ways I didn't need to go further, but I was curious here. I recently raved about the Westone Mach 70 IEM, which comes in at about $1,400 US, making it a little bit cheaper than the Sony IER-Z1R, and it's also a very different tuning. And so I thought it's probably not a comparison that we really need, but I was curious. I didn't know if maybe I was kidding myself with the Mach 70 and how much I enjoy it, if maybe technically it was going to fall way short of something like the Z1R. So I thought I'd find out. And sure enough, immediately these are very different sounding IEMs. If you like the Z1R, you're probably not going to be a huge fan of the Mach 70 unless you like a wide range of sounds. The Z1R is crisp, resolving and fun. The Mach 70s are smoother and more laid back. They're also supremely comfortable, so we already know where that part of it's going, but they're also surprisingly resolving. And as I actually listened to the two of these, I feel like the Mach 70 was actually probably more tonally accurate. The music sounded like I expected each instrument to sound, more so from the Mach 70 than from the Sony Z1Rs, and that's probably because the IER-Z1R is a somewhat V-shaped tuning. Again, thanks to that treble, but also thanks to the drop-off into the mid-bass and mid-range area. The vocals from the Mach 70 and mid-range in general has more weight and presence, and that helps to draw your attention to the lyrics, to the emotions of the music that are contained within lead instrumentals, solos, and vocals. On the other hand, the bass from the Mach 70 is way slower than what you get from the IER-Z1R. The Z1R is punchy, quick and tactile. The Mach 70 is present and solid, but it is a bit slower. And the final thing that I noticed with the Mach 70s was that I consistently was missing that sense of articulation, the sense of energy, and I don't mean energy in terms of aggression or treble, but the feeling of the music you get from the IER-Z1R was missing with the Mach 70. However, it was the Mach 70 that I wanted to keep putting back in my ears, and not just because they were physically more comfortable, but because I could turn the music up a little bit more. By having less treble and more mid-range and bass, I could turn the music up more, get involved in it, and engage with it more. And as a nice side effect, I found the Mach 70s actually gave me more insight into the mid-range, and so whilst it seemed to me at first that the Z1R was the technically superior IEM, time going back and forth showed me that it's actually just more about where the technicalities lie. And this might sound like a love letter to the Mach 70, which I don't intend it to be. I'm just putting it here to highlight the fact that magic can lie in many areas of the tuning of an IEM. The Z1Rs are impressive for the things that they do. They deliver a sense of technicality, transparency, and articulation that very few other IEMs can manage. But unfortunately, they come at the cost of sometimes a bit too much treble, if you're anything like me, but more importantly, and less easy to forgive, the fact that they're just too big. They're a beautifully designed IEM, they're incredibly well built, but that's actually kind of their undoing because being the size and weight of tanks, they want to fall out of many people's ears. I believe that's a common occurrence. I've seen this on forums before. I hoped it was going to be different from me, but it just wasn't. And so what I'd say is that if you can try a pair of IER-Z1Rs and you can find out if they're good for you ergonomically, if they are, and I'm guessing you're going to be super impressed with their sound, they're a brilliant IEM. Grab yourself a pair. But I think it's an IEM that you absolutely have to buy, either with the ability to return it after you try it, and or you should buy it after you've already checked if it fits you, because they're going to be challenging for many people in that particular area. As always, a huge thanks to all the channel Patreon members who helped make this video possible. If you'd like to become a part of the Passion for Sound community, you can click the link here or down the description below and check out the benefits that Patreon members receive and choose the tier that's right for you. And if you've enjoyed this video, I think you'll get a kick out of this one up here. But for now, let me leave it to the music. So happy listening, be kind to each other, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.